Hey, my wonderful people, you're welcome to the channel. This is Uglo Fashion. Today we'll be learning how to make a cape sleeve dress, and these are the fabric I'm using for the tutorial. So I folded my tappeta into two and measure all the basic bodice measurements. At first I measured the shoulder to nipple point, shoulder to underbust, shoulder to half length, shoulder to hip length, and shoulder to the gown length. And also I added one for M. Here I measured the shoulder circumference, which is 15 inches divided by 2, that's 7.5. Then from that point I measured 7 inches and I connected the two together. Here I measure half. From there to I measure 4.5. Here I measure 1 inch and I connected everything together. The circumference of the bust is 36 divided by 4 will give me 9 inches. Circumference of the under bust is 32 divided by 4 will give 8. Circumference of half length is 32 divided by 4 will give 8 inches as well. Circumference of the hip is 40 divided by 4 will give 10 inches. So for the knee length, I will deduct 4 inches from the hip length, which hip circumference, which is 36. The hip is 40 minus 4 will give me 36. And as usual, I will divide that by 4 because we usually divide all our bodies measurements by 4. So that will give me 9. So whatever I have there, I'll transfer it to the M. And I'll connect everything together. After I added 2 inches, that's for seam allowance. And whatever I have here also, I will add 1 inch to it to make a slope there, and I will do the same for the allowance. So this is what I have at the end of the day. Now we are good to go. After cutting that, I placed it back on the remaining fabric and I added 2 inches for zipper allowance. Now for the neckline, since I'm placing the two on each other, I will measure 3 inches for the neckline of the front. You can see where I started the tape from. Where I placed the tape, I placed it on the neckline of the front because there is zipper allowance at the back and I'm using 1 inch. The reason for the 1 inch is because I'm cutting both front and back bodies neckline together. At the shoulder, I measured 1 inch. I slant it back to the neckline, then cut it off. So I open the zipper allowance. This is the front, so I'm trying to input my dart. For the dart, the circumference is 7 inches, that's nipple to nipple. Then I divided it into 2, that's 3.5. So from the half length, I measured 4.5 inches down. That's where the dart is going to end. And at the nipple point, I measured 1 inch below. Now at the half length again, I measured half on both sides of the nipple to nipple circumference and I connected them this way. For the neckline of the front, I used 5 inches, then connect it back to the 3 inches I measured earlier. For the back bodice, the dart, I measured the same thing I measured for the front, but from the half length I added 1 inch. So instead of using, I added half inch. Instead of using 4 inches, I used 4.5 after the half length. So here I'm trying to shape the zipper side to avoid any bulge there. So I measured 1 inch. Then I connected it back to the hip and also connect back to the neckline. Now for the nail length, I'll measure 1 inch after the zipper allowance. Then I'll connect it back to the hip. The reason for this is just to give the boot side shape. Then I'll cut the remaining out. So this is what we have at the end of the day for the back bodies. If I want the split to lap on each other, this is how it will be, but because I'm not stitching them on each other, I want the down part to be open, so I'll just trim it out and fold this way. So I've cut it out on my lace fabric. The first thing I'll do, because there is a zipper and a cape as well, I'll first measure 2 inches and stitch from the neckline to that 2 inches and leave the remaining open. And also for the from the hem, from the hip, I will stitch back to the nail length. So now I'm leaving the remaining side open. I've added my zipper to the allowance I gave. I did the same to the lining. Now I'll stitch both lining and the lace together. I stitch the neckline as well. This is the hem. I told you I'll be folding that side, so this is what I'll do to that. You can see. I've also stitched on the front bodies. The next thing is to stitch the shoulders together. I've stitched out the dart as well. After stitching the shoulder, the next thing is to stitch the measurements. So I'll be stitching lace with lace and tappeta with tappeta. So this is what I have at the end of the day. Now to the sleeve side. After folding that, I measure the circumference I have for the neckline. That's 16 inches. So I folded the chiffon into 2, and see the joint parts I fold again into 4. So plus my seam allowance, I'll be using 17. The length I'll be working with rather is 17 inches. So I measure the 17 from the folded part. Then whatever I have here, I'll measure it round. All I need here is just the circumference of the neckline. So I'll just cut it out. But please note that when you are cutting yours, instead of measuring the circumference here, you can just place back the neckline of your dress at the edge there. So this is what I have after cutting, and I'll be taping it with this lace. So for the tape, I measured 4 inches, then fold into 2 to make 2 inches. So for the sharp edge, I folded this. I did it in form of a pleat there. So I later stitch on it, because if you don't do it this way, it won't allow the edge to lay well. There will be bulge there. Then I top stitch on it. The side that has to be stitched, I stitched there together. Then I later stitch it to the neckline. So I ensure that the joint part is at the side. So this is what I have at the end of the day. So thank you very much. After stitching, I notched it so that it will relax. Thank you very much for watching this video. This is why I said you should measure the neckline. You can see there is this puff around the neckline. So to avoid that, please use the measurement. Just place it on the chiffon fabric. You don't need to just cut it out. Thank you and stay blessed.